Hi, I'm Sean Romo, Senior Staff Archaeologist with Jamestown Rediscovery, and welcome back to another episode of Dig Deeper. I'm standing outside of our burial excavation structure, and today we're going to talk a little bit about what we found in this space near our pitch and tar swamp where we have a possible burial. So we're inside our burial excavation structure right now. And you can see we've set it up so that it kind of is centered on our burial. Now before we put this up, we were doing regular archaeological excavation in this space. And if you recall, we actually opened this area up back in the summer with our archaeological field school. We had come into possession of copies of some maps showing the finds from the 1940s, and on those maps, we could see that there was a burial in this location. Now, we're awfully close to the pitch and tar swamp, or at least a part of it. And one of the things we've been concerned about lately are rising waters. We're getting a lot more heavy rainfall, we're getting a lot more storms kind of consistently, and of course we have to contend with sea level rise and climate change more generally. One of the things we've been noticing is that the pitch and tar swamp, which has been here for hundreds if not thousands of years, is starting to grow. It's starting to expand outside of what the boundaries had been. And the area just to our north, back in the 1920s and 30s, was actually dry. It was farmed land. Since then, it's become more and more inundated, and we're concerned about groundwater expanding out from there. Now, the reason that's concerning for us is when you have remains, be they human or animal, if those bones get waterlogged, a lot of times they dissolve completely and disappear. We chose to excavate in this space, knowing there was a burial here, to see if this burial was in danger. Because if the remains had been damaged in this burial or destroyed, we wanted to know that. When we excavated here with the field school, we had that map to go on to find where this burial was. And we found that the drawings from the 1940s matched this space pretty much exactly. But there were some things we didn't know about. And when we dug down, we found that the folks in the 40s had actually dug a deeper cut around the burial when they first found it. So if you look right below me, this nice rectangular space that's a little bit lower is actually pretty much the boundaries of that 1940s dig. They had excavated down another 3-4 inches to get a better view of the burial. So we had to remove all this fill that was over here to actually find the surface of the burial. The soil around it is actually subsoil. It's the natural clay that forms up the lower strata of the island. And so we usually stop at this level. The folks in the 40s did a little bit of over digging to get down and see that burial more clearly. When we decided to excavate this burial, the very first thing we did after exposing it was to run ground penetrating radar. Hopefully that would give us an idea of how deep we needed to go to see remains and what kind of state they were in before we even started. Unfortunately, the radar for this was somewhat inconclusive. We thought maybe we could see the outline of human remains, but we weren't certain. And we couldn't see things as clearly as we could at our other burial sites up in the 1607 burial ground, where we could identify essentially full skeletons from the radar scans. So we were left a little bit in the dark with this. Surprisingly, we did not find human remains in here. What we ended up finding was a large board or log that had been thrown in here, and it actually stood out very clearly. And we initially thought that might be the surface of a coffin. But we didn't find any companion pieces, and this was only about this wide, even though it was just about 5 feet long. So it wasn't part of a coffin. We did sample some of that wood. We took pieces of it where we could see it and sent it into the lab to try to identify the type of wood it might be, because that might give us insight as to what was in this potential burial. But we didn't find any human remains. We found a lot of roots, a lot of bioturbation, as we call it, We have several big trees nearby, and this area was soft enough that those roots grew straight through everything, jumbling up the soil even further, and actually making it very difficult to ascertain the boundaries. And if you look carefully at the walls of this burial, you can see that there are areas that are undercut. And that's almost certainly from that bioturbation, from the roots cutting in and bringing in different soils and undermining stuff. Now, we didn't see any staining from human remains. We didn't see any pieces of human remains. If there was somebody here originally, that person, unfortunately, seems to have disappeared with time. It's also possible, though, that this was never used as a burial and might not even be one. It might have been one that was dug in preparation to put someone in the ground and who was then buried somewhere else. Or it could be a different feature that we just don't understand quite yet. Now, you're probably wondering why there's a big hole right in the middle of it. And that was actually our last major test to be 100% certain that the soil in here wasn't fooling us, that we definitely were in natural deposits and weren't looking at a cap that was all of a sudden going to reveal human remains underneath. So we carefully excavated down about this much, and the soil didn't change. Afterward, we said, let's see if there's more, and we kept going down about that deep. Still the same. This is definitely natural material. It's just a different type of subsoil that we're seeing out here. So we've reached the bottom. This is the maximum extent of our archaeological feature here. And as I said, didn't find anybody home. So if this was a burial, the fact that there are no remains in here suggests that this could have been subjected to that wet-dry cycle I talked about earlier, and the bones might have dissolved. One of the things we did while excavating here was to retain all of the soil we removed from this space. Now the idea was we would either water screen it to find every small object that's in there, or put it through a flotation tank, which would accomplish the same thing, but also give us a better sample of macrobotanical remains, so charred seeds, pieces of charcoal, things like that. When we look through those bags of soil, one of the things we're going to be looking for are tooth enamel fragments, because often if you have a burial and the remains are gone, you do actually still have enamel surviving, because that's some of the hardest material in your body. It takes a long time to break down. So if there are tooth fragments in here, we'll know that there had been a person buried in this space, and because of its proximity to the swamp and because of the wet-dry cycle, they just didn't last for 300 or 400 years. So now that we're done excavating that possible burial, we're actually not done in this space. Next thing we're going to do is take down the burial tent, and that way we can continue excavating in the area around it. We were very focused on getting prepped to do that burial work, but there's still soil in these archaeological test units that we need to investigate. This whole area has been plowed. We have a little bit of that plowed soil left, and right underneath we've already found bits and pieces of several other archaeological features, including 3 post holes. So we're anticipating finding a little bit more in here over the next few weeks. So stay tuned for our new findings from this area.